The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Sanchez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to direct our attention to the importance of preserving our planet and what we should do to address the issue of the changes going on in our climate. Protecting our environment and addressing climate change are issues which are important to all of our cities across the United States. In fact, at a very local level, many communities are working on these issues because they face them directly head-on. And for the Latino community, like other communities, we're family-oriented, and we want to provide a better future for our generations to come, and that includes leaving our planet better for our grandchildren and their children. And as the Latino population continues to increase in the United States, we are about 1 out of every 4, and they say that in another 30 years or 40 years, we will be 1 out of every 3 Americans. Our exposure to climate change and the risks of pollution are even more important because our zip codes, where we live, where the Latino community lives, that's where we're highest at risk. It's estimated that close to 50% of all Latino Americans live in counties that frequently violate ground-level ozone standards. It just doesn't affect Latinos, by the way. Asian Americans tend also to live in those zip codes. And well, what that means is that we're breathing dirtier air than most Americans, and we have more respiratory illness. And poor environmental protections affect the food that feed our children, the air that our families breathe, and the water that we drink. Since I was elected to Congress almost 20 years ago, I have worked tirelessly to work in Orange County, where I live and where I represent, to help get some green projects in, both in Orange County and in California. For example, I have fought to maintain the funding for the Pacific Crest, which serves residents of the entire West Coast and visitors from around the world. And of course, I'm an avid hiker, so I love that trail. And in fact, in this Congress, I co-sponsored legislation which would permanently extend the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which ensures the conservation of national parks, rivers, streams, and it provides grants to local parks and to recreation projects. And one of the things it does is try to ensure that, for example, California being so long in length, that you could start at the southern portion of California and actually walk through wilderness all the way to the Oregon border. It's a bipartisan program, this Land and Water Conservation Fund. And that's why it kind of distresses me a little bit that we haven't funded it, that we as a Congress have not funded it. Because it's incredibly important, especially in urban areas, such as my district, where there's little natural environment left and where we need open space, green parks. It's where Latinos go to have their barbecues. It's where we have our family gatherings. It's incredibly important to us. Sometimes we live in pretty cramped conditions, and we need that outdoor space, even if it's in an urban area. Places like Pearson and Pioneer Park in my hometown of Anaheim, or Centennial Park in Santa Ana, or our beautiful Santa Ana Zoo. They've all been made possible by the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And Mr. Speaker, do you know what the total cost to taxpayers for these wonderful developments are? 0. The Land and Water Conservation comes at no cost to the taxpayer, but it benefits them immensely. And still, this House has failed to fund this. It expired on September 30th. So, Mr. Speaker, the Land and Water Conservation Fund is another example of a common sense bipartisan program in which this House has neglected to act. So I'll ask the members of the House, can you go back to the people of your district and say to them, I don't really care about your parks, I don't really care about the environment, I don't care about where you hang out with your families. This Congress has to act. We should act together on this because it's incredibly important to our families. And I'll leave you with a quote, another one from one of my favorite people, His Holiness Pope Francis. I call for a courageous and responsible effort to redirect our steps and to avert the most serious effects of the environmental deterioration caused by human activity. I'm convinced that we can make a difference. I am sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.